And now I have the pleasure to introduce Professor Hanan Hamid, the eminent clinical hematologist. She's a professor at Ain Shams University, and as you know, Professor Hanan's talk are very interesting and very updated, very interesting to both the clinical and the laboratory hematologists. Her talk now will be about updates in understanding TTP.
Thank you very much, Professor Azza. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for giving me the great chance to be with you almost annually. I hope I'm not doing too much presentation with you, but I really enjoy being with you. The tough task of me today for the coming 20 minutes is to discuss TTP and the evolution of our understanding of the biology and pathogenesis of the disease, and how the treatment is totally different now from the old days. The first case of TTP have been described in 1924, and this was the first case documented in a 16-year-old girl with abrupt onset of petechiae pallor, followed by paralysis, coma, and death. And autopsy showed hyaline thrombi occurring internal arterioles and capillary. So the first case was documented 1924. We wait till the 50s to understand the pentad of TTP. By the 80s, we know that we have a problem with the von Willebrand factor and defect there. And in the 90s, we start to speak about unexplained thrombocytopenia and autoimmune hemolytic anemia or microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. And by the new millennium, unexplained triad of microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, decreased platelet, and CNS affection. And with the 2010, we start to understand that to diagnose a TTP, we have to have ADAMTase activity less than 10%. So these are the diagnostic and pathogenic milestones of TTP. We need to know what are the clinical facts of this disease. Approximately 1,000 new cases are diagnosed each year in the United States, and commonly in the middle age group, around 40 years of age, but I have seen cases in their teens age and 20s. Common, as I said, in the middle, more common in females, particularly postpartum, acute onset and fulminant course, and mortality rate, if untreated, is 90% within few weeks. So I think this is one of the most aggressive hematological disease which can take the life of the patient in few days or weeks if untreated and if undiagnosed properly. Relapse rate is around up to 40%. So when treat your patient, you have to be prepared for a relapse at any time, which could be passed unnoticed in the first few days of relapse. So the syndrome of Combs negative, and we have in the category of hemolytic anemia with Combs negative a lot of fatal disease. I will put on the top of list TTP and PNH. And we have to be aware of that. We have to be very cautious when we deal with hemolytic anemia, because it could be a life-threatening. While we are delaying diagnosis, the life of the patient could be terminated by the disease. It is a microangiopathic hemolysis with thrombocytopenia in absence of an alternative explanation of this manifestation. And this could be associated with fever, neurological or renal abnormalities. And these 5 things are the pentad. You have to have 3 to 4 of them to diagnose TTP according to the year 2000. Nowadays, to diagnose TTP, you have to have ADAMTase 13 activity less than 10%. What we see in the peripheral blood for my colleagues from the laboratory is this characteristic fragmented red blood cell and these helmet-shaped red blood cells, microsphere, and of course thrombocytopenia with large size platelet, and this is very clear in the 2 smears we see here. What are the different types of TTP? We are having 2 important types. We have congenital thrombocytopenic purpura, and we have acquired thrombocytopenic purpura. And for our astonishment, the majority of cases are acquired case, and the majority of patients are patient in adulthood. Yet, cases of pediatric, which are circle cases, are documented as diagnosed as TTP, and not only microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, which contains a very wide, actually cover for a lot of diseases other than TTP. So, when we review, we need to know what are the causing factors, what are the predisposing factors, and what are the precipitating factors. The causing factor is deficiency of ADAMTase 13, whether congenital or acquired due to the presence of immunoglobulins which antagonize the activity of ADAMTase 13. Predisposing factor, the female gender is a predisposing factor, black ethnicity is a predisposing factor, higher in the patient, in the people with HLA-DRB 1 and obese patients are more liable for TTP episodes and relapse if they got the disease. Precipitating factor condition increasing von Willebrand disease like infection, malignancy, pregnancy, delivery, or surgery. But there are potential candidates and cellular candidates which are unknown players, and we need more time to understand their contribution in the pathogenesis of TTP, like cell receptor abnormality, some sort of mutation of ADAMTase 13 other than what we know, and variability of von Willebrand sensitivity to ADAMTase 13, increased von Willebrand polymorphism, and some abnormality in the platelet themselves and into the endothelial lining of the blood vessels. To know the pathogenesis of the congenital TTP, it is the chromosome number 9 again. We are very fond in hematology with chromosome number 9. At the Q limb, very near to the terminal, we have Abelson chromosome. At the P limb, we have the JAK2 mutation. And in TTP, we are having as well ADAMTase 13 gene very close to the Abelson, which is just below it. So it is 9q34 corresponding gene, and the familial recurrent are having constitutional deficiency, acquired idiopathic transient autoantibody, no deficiency, and hemolytic uremic syndrome. Mostly we have normal level of the enzyme. So what happens in TTP with the ADAMTase 13? We do have an increase of the high molecular weight multimer of von Willebrand factor. Without ADAMTase 13, long, sticky, high molecular weight multimer will accumulate, and it will react with the platelet, enhancing platelet aggregation and enhancing adhesion to the blood vessels. So that's what happened normally. We have von Willebrand polymer with cryptic cleavage, and we have activated ADAMTase 13. This will break the long chain of multimers of von Willebrand factor and prevent aggregation with the platelet. While in cases of TTP, this process is prevented either due to deficiency of ADAMTase 13 or due to presence of autoantibodies, and this will lead to a very long chain of von Willebrand disease attaching along of platelets, causing thrombosis of the blood vessels. So we need to identify exactly what's TTP, and according to these two papers published in 2014 and 2018, we need to have the diagnostic value of ADAMTase 13 in TTP versus other thrombotic microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. A severe ADAMTase 13 less than 10% again and again is the cutoff to diagnose a case of thrombocytopenic purpura. And many microangiopathic hemolytic anemia or thrombotic microangiopathic anemia are presented with clinical and hematological features, but they are having ADAMTase 13 above 20%. This will totally exclude TTP from our differential diagnosis, and it must be differentiated from exacerbation from other microangiopathic anemias, because exacerbation and relapse are common in TTP, requires aggressive immune therapy in more than 50% of cases. Specific therapy like Caplacizumab and recombinant ADAMTase 13 are now available, and some of them are FDA and EMEA approved, and the other micropathic anemia do not respond to plasma exchange. So we need to categorize which disease we are dealing with to know exactly what to do for our patients. And as you see, in cases of TTP, almost ADAMTase less than 5%, while in other thrombotic microangiopathic anemias, the level is even up to 50%, and the platelet count and creatinine could be creatinine less than other microangiopathic anemia, while the platelet count is less than half of the other microangiopathic anemia. Schistocytes are more frequently present in TTP, and haptoglobin undetectable in almost 94 or 95% of cases of TTP, and plasma exchange is a treatment of choice in 92% of cases, and median number of plasma exchange is very high comparable to other microangiopathic anemia. So we need to know the role of testing of this ADAMTase 13 in diagnosis and management. Of course, TTP, as you see, is the main concern with ADAMTase 13, and it is usually less than 10%, either due to deficiency or due to autoimmune antibodies. We could have decreased ADAMTase 13 in some thrombotic disorders and in other microangiopathic anemia, but in all of them, the level is above 20 doses. Another thing to differentiate between the acute episode of TTP and at the measurement at clinical response and measurement and at remission, this will tell us is the patient responding or not, or is the patient progressing into relapse or not. ADAMTase activity less than 10% is diagnostic of TTP and predictor of relapse and predictor of response, while, as you see, ADAMTase 13 inhibitor are not associated with diagnosis, but they are very important to assess for in relapse, while the anti-ADAMTase 13 antibody could be present at diagnosis, and they are essential in relapse if it is acquired TTP, particularly IgG4 type. So let us go for a case which will show us how foggy could be the diagnosis of TTP, and we might lose the life of the patient before doing that. And this case is not mine, it is published in one of the very respectable hematological periodicals. A 20 years female patient presented with pelvic pain of 2 days duration, and this was followed one day by altered color perception in one eye. Upper respiratory tract was present 1 week prior to the symptoms. Neuroexamination showed nothing with good visual acuity, and CT head was unremarkable. A CBC showed platelet count to be 5,000. The patient was ordered, before she went to the center which treated her, was ordered to or recommended certain investigations, and it shows that this patient does have hemolytic anemia and Coombs negative, while ophthalmology consultation with certain investigation showed chorioretinopathy with serious retinal detachment. Then no schistocytes were present in the peripheral blood, and steroids therapy was admitted on the basis of diagnosis of ITP. So she has been diagnosed as ITP. She received steroids and IVIG. Haptoglobin was very low, less than 10. LDH start to rise. Reticulocytic count, in spite of 12 hemoglobin, was 2.5. And still up till now, no schistocyte. Let us look at the different modalities of treatment and the response of hemoglobin in spite of IVIG. Steroids and platelet and even IVIG later, the hemoglobin starts to decline. Look at the platelets. In spite of giving IVIG steroids, the platelets are still less than 10, while platelet transfusion raises the platelets for few hours, then it goes again to less than 10,000 platelet count. So 4 days later, despite aggressive ITP treatment, even with massive platelet transfusion, IVIG, steroids, and immunosuppressives, the patient developed severe headaches, another hematological attending suspect, TTP, and peripheral blood sample show 10 to 12% schistocytes in the peripheral blood. So after 4 days of symptomatology, even with neurological and even with hemoglobin 12 or something, LDH rises to more than 1,000, emergency plasma first started, ADAMTase 13 level was less than 5%, and inhibitors were there. So in thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, we need to know that retrospective study of almost more than 400 patients showed that 20% were initially misdiagnosed in the best centers of hematology practicing thrombosis and hemostasis. So why we do have that high percentage of misdiagnosis of those patients? Because 50% of those patients, we might diagnose them or more, we might diagnose them as Evans syndrome or as ITP, absence of schistocytes with anemia could stay for up to 1 week in patient with TTP. And this is very valuable time not to lose our patient. Positive Coombs test could be present in minority of those cases, particularly if this is an acquired TTP post-infection or post-inflammatory process. Or we might diagnose them as stroke or acute renal failure, or there might be no anemia or schistocytes. So we need to do exactly what is the diagnosis. Is this diagnosis fitting me? And is it an ITP or TTP? The fitting one is a TTP, and we have to go, if we suspect, for management of TTP, because, as I said, it is a fatal disease. Now, if we have an autoantibody for ADAMTase 13, we have to give those patients rituximab. It's beyond any doubt now. I have plenty of patients who are TTP, and I'm giving them low to moderate dose of rituximab with minor indication of relapse or at the time of the diagnosis. We have to assay the inhibitors either by Bethesda type assay or by ELISA assay. Now, with this very nice review article published this year, you can see that primary immune-mediated TTP is more than half of those patients, almost 60%. يبقى حوالي 60% من مرضانا بالTTP are patients with autoantibody to ADAMTase 13. And take a look, autoimmune diseases is 10%, which is again subcategory of that if you put them together. Infection, HIV, again, it is immune mediated, while congenital is only 5% of cases. And the mere presence of cancer can initiate a process of thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, not a microangiopathic anemia in the lowest situation. And pregnancy is another equal to deficiency and congenital. Some drugs are doing that, and I have seen many cases due to clopidogrel intake complicated by thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, post-transplantation, whether solid organ or hematological. And now I'm preparing a known case of acquired TTP for hepatic transplantation with the team of liver transplantation at Ain Shams University. This is a very critical and very delicate situation. I'm preparing the patient by rituximab, and we are in the final process of investigating the donor with this patient. So, what are the causes of TTP? Idiopathic in 37% of cases, drug-associated, and as I said, many drugs are known, like ticlidipine and clopidogrel and quinine. Checkpoint inhibitors are reported with a lot of complication, particularly occurrence of TTP, autoimmune disease in some cases, as I said, cancer, infection, pregnancy, postpartum, blood diarrhea, prodroma or episode, and hematopoietic stem cell transplantation and other transplantation. Clinical manifestation, as I said, TTP should be suspected in any patient with microangiopathic hemolytic anemia and thrombocytopenia until proved otherwise. In patient with thrombocytopenia, visceral organ involvement is very important. A typical presentation of TTP are countless, and of them is gastrointestinal symptoms at the top of the list. We have a lot of patients, and I do remember one of my patients, he has had double nationality, Egyptian and German, and I diagnosed him as TTP in Egypt, and after 1 year and after one episode of relapse, he has been in Germany, and before he came back to Egypt, his doctor called me and she said, please, if he has any minimal diarrheal or GIT symptoms, give him a treatment, do plasma exchange, even if you don't have a schistocytes or hemolysis or thrombocytopenia. Of course, classic pentat could be there. Neurological symptoms are very important. I'm not going to go in detail, but anything could happen, starting from just mild psychological, or even, I do remember, I was getting into the clinic and I saw a lady waiting in the waiting area doing something like that. Something like a tic in a very continuous, unrationalized way. She was slightly pale. I said, bring this lady first, and I suspected her to be a TTP because of that condition. One of the causes of early death cause in cases of TTP is cardiac affection. And we will be surprised to know that up to 20% of cases of TTP could have acute myocardial infarction, which could pass not that painful like the classic myocardial infarction. And nowadays, and there is now a draft for guidelines for TTP, which is discussed by the International Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis. They sent me the draft to comment on it. And this draft, among the points to be considered in the pathogenesis and in the prognostic data of the TTP is the troponin level. Because if a patient with TTP with high troponin, this means that his coronaries are affected and he might have a subclinical, subendocardial myocardial infarction or even a myocardial infarction without pain. And this could be seen clearly in a specimen from cadaver with TTP. So observation and initial presentation of TTP, many symptoms could be present. It could be just very mild psychological, very mild CBC changes. Patient with TTP may die suddenly. As I said, cardiac affection is one of the leading cause of that. ADAMTase 13 level is the crown of the jewel of the crown. Reported ADAMTase 13 less than 10% reveal unsuspected TTP and may initially occur together with an additional factor. I'm not going to go through that, but I will again show you that we are having 3 subtypes of putting a score for the prognosis of TTP. We have the plasmic score, we have the French score, and we have the Panteley score. Each of them is giving some points to each category, including the CBC, the mean corpuscular volume, INR, ANA, D-dimer, and I'm expecting very soon that we will have the troponin with that, and we have what we call low, intermediate, and high risk of TTP, which should be treated accordingly. Exclude other cause of microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. If not, put yourself a diagnosis, confirm the diagnosis for yourself as TTP, treat the patient. We will lose nothing, but we will lose the patient if we don't. And to see that a lot of centers, including MD Anderson Cancer Center, all over the years, all the red bars are the misdiagnosis was not, or the diagnosis of TTP was not suspected when the patient have been seen for the first time. So the confirmed or suspected diagnosis in the first few days is still a minority, even in the best centers in the world. So we have to keep this diagnosis in mind, not to lose our patient. Now, concerning the evolution of therapy, we have spoke about the evolution of understanding of the pathogenesis of the disease. While evolution on therapy, you can see the first attempt to treat TTP was in 1977 by just plasma exchange. Then we uprise to the plasma exchange and steroids. Then we start to know that N-acetylcysteine could be of help. Then we have now recombinant ADAMTase 13, which is not yet approved. And then we have the capsulizumab, and this capsulizumab have been approved by EMEA in September 2018, and approved by the FDA by February 2019. Plasma exchange is the cornerstone in the treatment of TTP, and this should be done by fresh frozen plasma and not salt-free human albumin, because fresh frozen plasma contains a lot of ADAMTase 13, which could be a supplementary for those patients. When you do that with a steroid, you suppress the antibodies against ADAMTase 13, and you provide the patient with ADAMTase 13 in the fresh frozen plasma. Rituximab now is a treatment of choice for the majority of cases with acquired TTP. Other immunosuppressive could be of help, like many we will see now. New treatment are under investigation. So how to see rituximab? Plenty of papers showing the difference between rituximab concerning relapse-free survival comparable to non-rituximab therapy, and this is even for maintenance and prevention. And preemptive, you can see clearly those who are taking relapse-free survival, those who are taking rituximab comparable to those who are not taking rituximab. The dose have been questioned as well, but the majority of people are recommending to start with traditional dose, and you can maintain or you can give prophylactic a smaller dose. Again, these are the prednisolone, how much ADAMTase 13 activity comparable to cyclosporin, and this study particularly showed the failure of cyclosporin. I'm not going to go through all of that, but we came to lately caplucizumab, which is a monoclonal antibody preventing the long high molecular weight multimer from being attached to the platelets and preventing the process of long multimer with a lot of platelet attaching to the wall and doing thrombotic event. And this caplucizumab with a study called Hercules, first announced in the ASH 2017. It has been published many years, and this showed marked decline in the symptoms and the deaths of the patient comparable to others. And as you see here, caplacizumab comparable to plasma exchange showed much reduction in the plasma exchange days, almost 41% plasma volume per liter. ICU duration is 65% less, and hospitalization and duration is almost a third less than placebo, which is plasma exchange and steroids. The side effects is mainly bleeding tendency, and this is the drug, which is a monoclonal antibody approved by the FDA at the start of this February. This is the paper concerning recombinant ADAMTase 13 in TTP, which is very promising treatment, and this is the role of N-acetylcysteine in prevention of thrombotic episode in TTP, showing the rise of the platelet count and the decline of the LDH. I think with that, we have to go for, if it is a deficiency of ADAMTase 13, it is either congenital or acquired TTP, plasma infusion, von Willebrand concentrate infusion, or recombinant ADAMTase 13 in congenital subtype. Acquired subtype, we need to do immunosuppression with rituximab or something else, while a typical hemolytic uremic syndrome with eculizumab is a treatment. Cancer with other chemotherapy and hypertension, vasculitis, plasma exchange is not useful. So severe ADAMTase deficiency, less than 10% is diagnostic of TTP. Rituximab, low dose could be effective. Caplacizumab will reduce the mortality. Recombinant ADAMTase 13, particularly in congenital TTP, might be emerging. Cocktail of caplacizumab and recombinant ADAMTase 13, it could be the future. Plasma exchange remains the standard of care for those patients. Depression and neurocognitive disorders are late complication. We shouldn't wait for that, and thank you very much.